We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Now, we have an exciting show for you today, talking Joe Biden's disastrous poll numbers and the media abandoning ship, Top Gun Maverick, real or imaginary, what's happening with the US Navy, how can schools protect themselves from mass shootings, and why new gun laws almost always never work. I want to take a brief moment to say a special thank you to our listeners in Cadillac, Missouri on WATT, 1240 AM and 106.1 FM. Thank you for being here. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. For President Joe Biden, the clock is ticking on his window of opportunity to pass any meaningful legacy legislation. With razor-thin congressional majorities and a fourth estate facade beginning to crack, it's time to forget about asking for whom the bell is tolling and get straight on with figuring out who the bell ringer really is. Now, we're fortunate to be joined by Liberty Nation's senior political analyst and longtime host of this here radio show, Mr. Tim Donner, who can pass the numbers and crack the codes with the best of them. Welcome back, Tim.
Thank you, Mark.
So, Tim, let's rip the Band-Aid off. How bad is it for Joe Biden? I mean, we're just a few short months out from the November congressionals. How bad is it? What's the diagnosis, Doctor?
Well, I would say, in a sense, all you need to say is that he's lower than Donald Trump ever was. In other words, the standard, the left always says he was the worst president in American history, Donald Trump. Of course, they did everything to make sure those poll numbers stayed low through the Russia hoax and everything else they did to try and bring him down every single day. But Biden is now lower. In fact, Mark, in half of the most recent polls, he's below 40%. In the Reuters poll, Ipsos, and nobody accuses them of being conservative.
Minus 23 points.
Minus
behind.
23. He's at 36% approval. Now, you know, the disaster awaiting at midterms for the Democrats is looking more and more ominous because this president isn't getting any more popular. And as you and I have talked about before, Mark, there's not a lot of hope that he will because he's in decline. He's not a young man who can learn a few things and recover. Or someone like Trump, who's never been in the position, doesn't know Washington, has no allies, and struggles to get things done, but he did. With Biden, he's been in Washington for 50 years. And if anything, you would have thought he would be competent, but he's not. So you've got Emerson at 38, Reuters at 36, Quinnipiac at 38. So he is underwater dramatically. And again, I don't see what he does to get out of it. If inflation goes down, that'll help. Other than that, taking steps to close the border, perhaps, opening up the spigot on fossil fuel, he's not going to do that. And we get new record gas prices every single day. This is a formula for utter disaster, especially when you consider that over 80% of the American people believe we're headed for recession.
And they might well be right. A couple of points I'd like to pick up on there, Tim. You said that Joe Biden, he's not in a position to learn new tricks. And that really strikes me because he really should be at the very pinnacle of his game. I mean, this is a president who knows everybody in Washington, D.C. He knows everybody in the Fourth Estate. He knows everybody on K Street. He has every opportunity to succeed. And yet, whether through circumstance or his own failing abilities, he hasn't done so. And that really does bring me on to the other point. You also mentioned that they compare Joe Biden to Donald Trump and the low approval numbers that Donald Trump had. And you're absolutely right that they point out that they've been pointing out that he's still above where Donald Trump was at this point in his presidency. But of course, that's now in the past. But that was
not
always
anymore. So now they're just not talking about the poll numbers.
But that was always a disingenuous point, wasn't it, Tim? Because Donald Trump was facing allegations that he was essentially a Russian spy, that more than half of the country and allegedly all of the Fourth Estate believed that he was a Russian asset working for Vladimir Putin. And at the same time, as you say, you had all the media pushing against him. And so that was artificially deflated numbers. But with Joe Biden, the opposite is true. People don't believe that he's a Russian agent. He might be a Chinese one. And the media is pushing his numbers up as much as possible, which brings me nicely to an article that you wrote on the page of libertynation.com about how the Fourth Estate, the media, is jettisoning its support for Joe Biden. I got to ask, why now?
Well, it strikes me, Mark, that most of the people that voted in 2020 heard what they wanted to hear, what they were hoping to hear at the Biden inaugural. Unity, unity, unity. That was the theme of his inaugural. And I think people were delighted to hear that because they felt that Donald Trump was not a unifying figure. Now, since then, Joe Biden has done anything but unify. Now, if he had said in his inaugural that the threat to the nation of white supremacy and the threat to the nation of ultra MAGA was something that was going to be the focus of his presidency, then people could expect what we've seen. But he has promised one thing and delivered something entirely different. People are at a loss to understand where the leadership is. He seems to not have his hand on the tiller, and there's no guidance, there's no direction. And how he recovers from that, I don't know. He's going to have a change of chief of staff. Ron Klain will be out soon enough. But I think as I concluded that article about how the elite media is finally can't turn away from the fact that this presidency is the Titanic. They can't turn away from it. They can try to make it look as good as possible. The left can say, oh, well, he got infrastructure, and look, we only have 4% unemployment, but you can put a bonnet on a warthog, but it's still a warthog.
Yeah, I expected the media to act a little bit more like degenerate gamblers, as it were, that they make a bet, they lose, they keep putting money down, and they get the mindset that we've invested so much in this proposition. But as you point out, they are starting to distance themselves from it, whether that's by not talking or just by acknowledging that things are not as rosy as they once promised. Now, let's talk very, very briefly about that unity question, that unifying force. Is it possible that a chief executive, commander-in-chief, can't actually bring unity to the nation if they have policy goals that are in themselves divisive?
Well, he was elected like George W. Bush, but he's trying to govern like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And what I mean is, there was no mandate for him to do anything other than not be Donald Trump. That was the only mandate he got. And yet, with his Build Back Better and all these socialist schemes, which we barely were able to brush aside thanks to Joe Manchin, FDR came into office with a striking mandate to do something like the New Deal. Joe Biden came in basically to sort of calm things down, make people feel that things had returned to what he was calling normal, where there wasn't a crisis every single day. He's tried to act like he got this overwhelming mandate to turn the United States from a constitutional republic into a social democracy. That's not what people voted for. That's not what they want. And he's not even good at trying to do what he's trying to do.
Those who crave power will always hear what they want to hear. Tim Donner, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Coming up later in the show, we talk reflexive gun laws and their inevitable failure. But next up, after this short break, we examine Top Gun Maverick and how realistic US air superiority really is. We'll be right back. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
Daily tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.